the Dominican Republic, this is Cynthia McAllister. A massive earthquake measuring 7.0 on the Richter scale has devastated Haiti's capital city of Port-au-Prince. Local officials estimate there could be as many as 300,000 people dead. Rescue and medical teams from countries around the world have been dispatched in a desperate race against time to find survivors among the ruins as Haiti now plunges further into chaos. The presidential palace and the National Assembly building suffered major structural damage.
When we saw what was happening there, within a couple of hours it was obvious we had to go. We were 2 hours away by plane. We knew that we could be on site. We knew we could take doctors. We knew we could make a difference.
We'd been invited by one of our global partners to come in and supply a medical team to take care of the urgent needs of the people. Broken bones, broken bodies, deaths, missing persons. So we said, yeah, we got to do this.
Within 36 hours of the earthquake happening, we were actually in Miami waiting to go down. There were some problems with Haitian airspace and some issues with getting planes in, any planes into the place. But we actually did fly down at 42,000 feet in this absolutely superb aeroplane and landed in Port-au-Prince airport. Now, of course, that's when the adventure really started. We were told that we would have 12 minutes on the ground. The plane would have 12 minutes to turn around and get out again. And so we had to land, unload everything, and they had to turn around and get out of there. One of our doctors clocked us 8 minutes.
As you enter Port-au-Prince, fly in over the city, the blue tarps and the tent cities were just everywhere. And as you drove through the city, there's people camped out in the median between rows of traffic. It's just an overwhelming picture of the impact of this disaster.
When we got to Port-au-Prince, we were met by some Baptist missionaries who were picking us up. And they took us up to the Baptist Mission Hospital, which is about 20 kilometers from Port-au-Prince itself. Of course, we drove through the city a little bit, on the edge of the city, and we could see the destruction. Even flying in, you could see the absolute magnitude of that destruction.
What I observed that was disturbing was just the images you have of children playing in garbage heaps. The water supply that people are using to bathe, just right by the roadside in puddles.
At the best of days, there are 3 million people living in squalor. And those shacks and those houses, and some nice houses too, and buildings and shops and schools had just been razed to the ground. We went straight up to the Baptist Mission Hospital and walked into that hospital. We were introduced to the medical directors, and the staff there had been waiting for us. And of course, when we walked in, they were so overwhelmed. They started to do their speech of introduction, and the medical director just broke down and wept. They had been on their feet attending to hundreds on hundreds of severely injured, crushed patients since the earthquake had happened. And when they saw us, we were just help. And so we went in there and we prayed with them and sent them home, and then started to get involved.
A ver, dile a la señora que estamos esperando una placa especial para empezar a operar esta clase de fractura.
Okay. This will be much better than all these equipments outside, all these machines.
The one thing that was overwhelming to us was just the sheer number of patients. They were everywhere. I mean, there were patients on floors, there were 2 and 3 in a bed, they were under the beds, they were in cupboards, they were in closets. There were just patients, and everyone was worse than the one before. They all had x-rays, horrendous fractures, crushing injuries to limbs, and we're talking about two days down from when this had happened now. It was totally overwhelming. We learned that in Port-au-Prince there were 5 functional operating rooms in the whole city that were left standing. 2 of those rooms were at the hospital where we were. One of those rooms had equipment in it that didn't function and no supplies. So we just commandeered the one operating room and started to make that work.
Yep, both bones of the forearm.
And she's still got her rings on? Great.
And she lifts it up and does her hair. And
we could operate on her. We have plates for that, but we have no time. It's a question of time.
Can you move your fingers?
Try.
Just try to.
The plan for today is that for the last 3 days we've just been operating straight through, and so the general practitioner doctors have been seeing the patients on the wards, checking on them afterwards. So today we split the hospital into 3. Each area has a general practitioner, and so the orthopedic people are going to go around with the general practitioner. We're going to see the post-operative patients. We're going to look at possible new patients, and so we split the 2 orthopedic surgeons up, and then at 9 o'clock we'll come together and make a definitive operating list of priorities for today. Everybody's condition is changing every day, so we can't make the list until really we've seen everybody and decided what's best to do.
Closed tib fib, yeah.
Closed tib fib operation.
And she's 65.
Yeah,
But do we have material for her?
No, if we have the material, we operate on her.
It was interesting because they normally do 3 or 4 surgeries a week, and we were programming 25 to 30 a day. They're not used to providing sterile supplies for everybody, for that amount of surgeries, sterile instruments. They weren't doing orthopedic cases. All of our cases for the first few days, they were all orthopedic cases. We have some great photographs of Dr. Wolf with a Black & Decker type drill, drilling pins into patients, and that was fine because the part that went into the patient was sterile, and it doesn't matter what kind of drill you use, but people have commented on that. But we just got in there and started to work. We used anything that we could that was sterile to drape the patient, drape the wound. Sterile gloves were in supply up to a certain point, and I remember we got to our last pair of size 7 sterile gloves for the surgeon, and I said, Dr. Febres, this is your final pair of size 7s. Do not put a hole in it. Do not rip it. There is no other one. From now on, you're going to have to use 8s or bigger, and you're going to have floppy fingers at the end. So he took the gloves, and we used the piece of sterile paper that it was wrapped in as a sterile field for the surgery, and started to operate. Before we'd finished that surgery and started the next one, somebody had found a whole box of size 7 gloves in the bodega. Everything like that happened. We were about to run out of diesel. Suddenly this truck appeared with diesel. We had no water in the hospital. We'd taken a water engineer from Ecuador, Martin Harrison. He was able to fix the whole water system for the hospital and the filtration system to provide them and the 300 extra people and family members with clean, drinkable water while we were there. So we just saw one time after another how God came through for us, and we were able to care for the people.
Don't worry.
As I travel through those areas, you always have to keep going back to the foundation of our hope in Christ, and that's what's so neat about visiting our partners in Haiti, is you can see in their lives, in the midst of this disaster, in the midst of all this poverty and all this desolation from the earthquake, you see the hope that Christ brings into their lives. And that's what's so positive about working with partnerships in Haiti.
Well, it's been wonderful because our HCJB Global partners have been so generous in providing the resources for us, not only for the initial crisis, but for the long-term redevelopment of the country. So we're going back in with other medical teams as follow-up. We're going back in with community development to rebuild clinics and hospitals and radio stations and churches. We are working long-term with our media partner, Radio Lumiere, to provide the equipment and the personnel and to upgrade their facilities so they can be more effective in telling about the love of Jesus over radio. So we're in there for the long haul. This isn't just a cut-and-run type of a thing. We're there long-term to rebuild the church, to rebuild the ministry in that community for the benefit of the people of Haiti.
One little lady who was very important to us, and the whole medical operation there, was called Madame Kapha. 83, 84 years old, little wrinkled, wizened face, a beautiful smile, wonderful Christian woman. And she worked tirelessly from the moment we arrived until she went home after all we did. And we were dying of exhaustion at the end of the day. And she was still there folding and sterilizing and getting instruments ready and cleaning up and stuff. She just worked with a joyful spirit. And after 3 days, she kind of said, "Would you by any chance have a blanket that I could have?" And we're like, "A blanket? Why do you need a blanket? Then we learned that Madame Kapha's house had been destroyed. She had been sleeping in the street without even a blanket for 3 days and still serving her people. On every occasion that she wasn't sterilizing and draping and cleaning and scrubbing, she was out there with the patients, with the family members. She was sharing her faith. She was singing with them. She was leading us in times of praise and worship and prayer at the beginning of every day. And that's when we began to see the tenacity, the strength of the Haitian people. We saw believers out there in the hospitals witnessing. We saw the Billy Graham Association evangelists in there. And we saw people turning to God. As the whole earth trembles and shakes, there's nothing like a good earthquake to make you think about eternal things. So many people are ready to live without God, but they're not ready to die without God. And at those difficult times, people's hearts turn to the Creator, to the God of the universe, to the one who holds all things in his hands and is there when the nations tremble and quake. And so we have seen and we have heard, and the news reports have backed up, there's been a turning of that whole nation back to God. There are men and women in that nation who have done a complete turnaround. People who are involved in animistic cults and practices in voodoo. Even the president of the country canceled the Carnaval fiesta and called people to prayer and fasting for the nation. God's purposes are just way above what we could ever see, but we do see the heart of a nation being changed, and we're so thrilled that we were able to be there and see that at that time.
One of the things that impressed me was as we visited Radio Lumiere, our radio partner there in Haiti, we had interaction with the staff, and it was very obvious that they're shell-shocked. The radio studio is still outside the building. People camped out because they're afraid of being undercover from all the earthquake, and definitely some very hurting people. They had lost some staff and their houses were destroyed, things like that. But they were all so excited to talk about the spiritual implications, the spiritual changes that Haiti had undergone from the earthquake, how people had showed up in droves near the presidential palace to pray and fast and rededicate this nation to the Lord after the earthquake. And they were very excited about that, and very excited about the radio station and the calls that they were getting and the response that they were getting spiritually from the earthquake.
Our experience in Haiti has taught us some things about how we want to expand being the hands of Jesus around the world. There are other needy places where we can bring in medical teams. There will be other crises that we can respond to, tsunamis and earthquakes and hurricanes. We want to be ready to respond, to be the voice and hands of Jesus in other circumstances. And so this is why we appreciate the prayers and the confidence of our HCJB Global partners in giving us the resources so that we can be ready to respond when a crisis happens. And we can be there, first responders and long-term responders, to be the voice and hands of Jesus. So I just want to thank our partners, our donors that have been so generous, and they've captured the vision to enable HCJB Global to be the voice and hands of Jesus around the world.
Whether through emergency medical teams being sent to earthquake disaster areas in Haiti, Peru, Mexico, or Indonesia, to medical outreaches in the Ukraine, in Latin America, in Africa, in war-torn Lebanon, or in India, to AIDS patient care and tsunami relief efforts in Indonesia, to water and sanitation projects in Africa and Latin America, HCJB Global is making a difference by serving with global partners as the voice and hands of Jesus worldwide.